Hi, I'm Jon Earnshaw. I'm the Chief Product Evangelist at Datametrics, and these are my SEO predictions for 2021. I've decided not to look at any other predictions as they're generally all the same. And anyway, I'm not going to be repeating things that we already know, such as Google is going to be looking at Core Web Vitals in May. And in doing that, they're going to focus on mobile. We've known this for months. Instead, I've divided this video into two parts. In part one, I'm going to cover the three things that I think Google is going to be doing or focusing on throughout next year. And in part two, I'm going to take you through the three things that if I were you, I'd be looking at focusing on right now to improve my organic performance in 2021. I'm also going to be putting some links below to further reading and videos and stuff like that with more details when necessary rather than get lost in some of that detail here today. Okay, let's begin with what Google is going to be doing. Number one, greater focus on intent. Now, let's face it, one thing that we know for sure is that Google spends billions of dollars trying to ensure that the SERP landscape is a true reflection of searcher intent. And to do this, this necessitates a move away from focusing on keywords to try and deliver the best results. So what's the evidence for this? Well, let's go back to 2015 when Google introduced RankBrain. This, if you like, is Google's disambiguation engine, and it was introduced in an attempt to deliver better results, particularly for longer, more complex or more ambiguous queries. So what did this change? Well, not a lot of it on the surface back in 2015, and anyway, it only handled around 10% of daily search queries. This had a lot of learning to do. But according to some primary research that we carried out at the back end of last year, it would appear that Google is definitely getting better at understanding those longer, more complex queries or sentences, if you like. Take a look at this slide. Now, as part of an observational research study that we carried out at Pi, we discovered that there was an obvious and direct relationship or correlation between query length and searcher satisfaction. As queries got longer and in many cases more ambiguous, satisfaction with the resulting SERP increased. We certainly didn't expect this result, and additionally, on top of that, the respondents that we spoke to suggested they were much more likely to make a purchase when their query was more conversational in nature. All of this seems to suggest that when we give the search engine more to go on, it delivers better results. The more detail we provide in a query, the more likely it is that Google will understand exactly what we're looking for, and not just from a broad intent perspective either. Google is no longer obsessed with keywords, and nor should you be. Added to all of this, we've got Google BERT, which was introduced into the mix last year, bidirectional encoder representations from transformers. Now, this is a neural network based technique for natural language processing, and what this does is that it helps Google better understand the context of words in search queries. So having said all of that, while keywords still are and still will be important for some time yet, Google is leaning towards intent. So what does this mean for us? From a content perspective, from a strategy perspective, from an SEO perspective? Well, I'm going to cover that shortly in the second part of this video. But for now, let's move on to number two. Greater focus on EAT, expertise, authoritativeness, and trust. It's all about quality as far as Google is concerned, and there's no greater manifestation of this desire to clean up the SERP and provide results that actually match intent than in those spectacular core algo updates. More on those in a bit. Right now, back to EAT. EAT has been one of the biggest topics in search for a couple of years now. Everybody's talking about it. We know what it stands for, but what actually is it, and why is it going to be more important in 2021? Okay, if you were to ask me a few years back, what does Google really care about? I'd have said four things: trust, authority, relevance, and quality. Now, years later, Google's actually been kind enough to tell us what they really care about and the signals that they're trying to measure in order to ensure quality results are getting returned for every query. And they've even published a terrific set of guidelines, there is a link below, that their own quality raters use when they're manually reviewing the expertise of the individuals who create your content, the authoritativeness of your content, its creators, and your website. And finally, the trustworthiness of all of those elements put together. Now, from everything Google says, it's fairly obvious that the measurement of these signals is algorithmic. And given that Google has 10,000 quality raters whose sole job it is to provide feedback as to the accuracy of the algorithm by reviewing websites, Google's ability to correctly measure each signals is only going to improve. And that's exactly what machine learning and AI is designed to do. Take a look at what Google's Gary Eisch has to say about the matter. He's talking about thousands potentially of baby algorithms all working together. Now, until recently, I always wondered, why would they have potentially thousands of baby algorithms working together? And then I read this book. Here you go. That's it there. Rebel Ideas. It's brilliant. And in one chapter, it describes why it's better to have a bunch of people who think differently come together in the same problem space to work out a solution than it is to have a bunch of super smart people who all think the same. Well, it turns out it's exactly the same for algorithms. And this leads us neatly into my third prediction for 2021. Number 3, 3 more core algorithm updates. Yeah, 3 of them. Now, at the start of 2020, based upon everything that we'd seen up to that point, I did predict that there would be 3 core algo updates this year. Okay, up until recently, I was sweating on that one a bit, but by the time we got to the first week of December, Google finally rolled out the 3rd update of the year on the 5th of December. And what a corker it was. Now, I've recently recorded a video documenting some key facts and figures, as well as the winners and losers in that one. And I'm also going to drop a link to that video below. So why do I think there are going to be 3 core updates this year? Well, there were 3 last year, and there were 3 the year before. And although the primary objective of these updates is to help deliver a quality SERP that matches searcher intent, the focus of each update has tended to be rather different, and this makes sense because the web is a big place after all. Early updates tended to be more focused on YMYL. Take a look at this chart. The 3 updates in 2019 and a January update in 2020 hit sites offering medical advice hard. And by the time we got to May 2020, it looks as though the algo had done a lot of its work. Perhaps we're now seeing a better quality of result for medical advice related queries. Have 5 cores finally done their work? Perhaps they have, because by the time we get to May 2020, Google set its sights on finance. Fast forward to December 2020, and the target was very much retail, particularly fashion, with a strong but subtle impact on many page 1 positions. So given all of this, I'm predicting another 3 core updates in 2021, with the first one in early April. Okay, so those are my 3 top predictions. So what do you need to do to prepare for these and to perform better throughout 2021? Well, number 1, you need to adopt an ecosystem approach to optimization. Put simply, today's search landscape is richer with opportunity than it's ever been. Just take a look at this web radar chart here. For this group of 300 search terms over a 7-day period in December, we can see 13 different types of feature returning. And this variety of result is surprisingly common. Throughout 2020, we've seen the adoption of schema and other good practice continuing to rise, and we've seen the search landscape continue to evolve, and it's going to keep on evolving. Just take a look at this side-by-side comparison of the exact same query only 3 years apart. On the left, just look how boring those classic links look. And now today, how normal, how interesting, how much more detailed that SERP looks. And this is great because we've got choice. We've got images, video, answer cards. People also ask, social assets, carousels, and more. And these aren't just results. These are all potential doorways or touch points into your online ecosystem. And I think that 2021 should be the year when we finally stop asking the question, are we on page 1 for that keyword yet? And replacing that with, well, how much of our real estate do we occupy on page 1 for our category or our subcategory? How many different SERP doorways have we opened? And if we're still talking about an individual keyword, how many features do we own on page 1? So what's the key to achieving this? Well, that begins, as always, inside the mind of your customers and creating the sort of content that we know they're looking for, not just the content that you happen to like creating. And you need to understand your content opportunities. What about images? Video? What does the SERP landscape actually look like? Analyze it at a category, subcategory, and a keyword level, and be forensic. Use the right tools to get the job done. If you see lots of people also ask, but few answer cards, there's an opportunity. If you see US answer cards in the UK SERP or vice versa, that's an opportunity as well. What does the feature layer actually look like above the fold? Now, once you've decided on your content type, you need to get better at connecting your assets together. And the better you get at doing that, the better Google is going to understand a relationship between your assets and your content. I'm talking about asset optimization and linking better between assets and pages. Take a look at this example. Here we can see one domain owning multiple SERP doorways for a popular high volume search term. And not only that, once you go through a doorway into their world, they've got clearly labeled migratory pathways connecting semantically related content and assets together. And this makes it easy for you not only to find related products, but also to discover new related things that you weren't even looking for. That's a connected ecosystem. Okay, time for thing to do number 2. That is practice contextual optimization. Every day when I wake up and put on my SEO hat and come to my shed, I always say to myself, I'm going to practice contextual optimization. And I'm not just going to optimize this piece of content in isolation, but I'm going to optimize it in the context of everything else that already exists in my online ecosystem. And why do I do that? Because that's literally the only way to guarantee that I'm going to avoid internal conflict or content cannibalization. And I've talked extensively about this subject, so I'm going to try and keep this one brief. How much is content cannibalization worth, or that cannibalized content? Let's take a look at just one example, and this one is literally the first one that I looked at. We're looking here at a revenue opportunity chart for a very well-known UK retailer, pulled from a Pi MI report. It's based on performance across 7 categories of homeware products. We're basing performance on their organic visibility for around 8,000 keyword searches. Now, this retailer, who is very well known, has got a lot of content sitting on pages 2 and 3 of Google right now. And the value of that is highlighted in those bars in pink. Over 75% of this is due to cannibalization, and that alone is worth to this business over £500,000 a week in lost revenue opportunities. And rather than go into the detail here, I'm going to put a link below to a much more detailed explanation of how to optimize contextually. But if I was against the ropes and I had 30 seconds to explain how to do this, I'd say stop. Before you add any content into your ecosystem, stop and ask the question, what content do we already have that is A, potentially conflicting, and B, complementary? And the only equipment that you need to do this are something with which to analyze the organic performance of your ecosystem across all features, some basic knowledge of Google site operators, and finally, the desire not to hose money away on wasted content that simply gets cannibalized. That's contextual optimization. Okay, time for number 3. Develop an intent-led content strategy. So when it comes to understanding customer intent and building out an intent-led content strategy, the only thing you need to make this possible are the answers to the 4 following questions about your customers. Number 1, what are they looking for? Number 2, what questions are they asking? Number 3, what are they thinking? And this in turn is influenced by question 4, what content are they currently consuming now? Now, to anyone that's ever heard me talk about intent before, it'll come as no surprise to learn that you can actually discover the answer to all of these questions just by looking at the SERP landscape. Take a look at this SERP radar view. Now, when you take a group of terms, it's often possible to determine intent according to the features that Google returns across a range of terms over time. Here we can see features that reflect 3 broadest intent categories: informational, navigational, and transactional. Now, the next slide shows features that typically fall into the main broad categories of intent, as well as the types of content that return as well. So with an understanding of the types of feature as well as the types of content, just from looking at the SERP landscape, you can begin to build out content that you know is going to work and that both your customers as well as the search engines will love because it matches intent. And this is a key part of your ecosystem approach to optimization as well. So there you have it, my 3 predictions for 2021, as well as the 3 things that I would definitely be doing right now to improve visibility, performance, and revenue in 2021. Thanks for watching.